Okay, so I'm going to be actually splitting these into two videos because my first video, there was some sort of glitch with the computer and it cut off yesterday while I was recording. So I'm going to pick up today with part two of our introduction to Gilgamesh. So I'm just going to slide in right here where I left off yesterday. We were talking about some of the traits of Gilgamesh, why he's considered a hero, and maybe some reasons why we might argue that he should not be considered a hero. Um, but remember, when we're talking about the hero, we simply mean this is the protagonist who is sent on the journey, right? That's really all that means. Gilgamesh is not a morally nice person, but over the course of his journey, he does learn how to become a better man. And that's really why we're with him for the duration of this journey. It starts off as a quest for immortality. That's his big obsession. He wants to live forever. After the death of his friend Enkidu, he really becomes obsessed with this idea of finding that magic potion, that elixir, whatever, that will enable him to live forever. That's not going to happen, but he will learn many important life lessons while he's on that quest. But just to review here, what are some of the traits Gilgamesh possesses? All of the required traits of the classic hero. He is a person of power and prestige. He is a great warrior who has earned the position of king of Uruk as the story opens. And as I was mentioning yesterday before I got cut off, um, he's a great leader, in the sense that he protects the people of Uruk and he has accomplished great things. He's built the great walls, he's celebrated. But at the same time, he's a leader that the people fear. He's a warmonger. He's power hungry. He rapes the young women of the village, takes them for his own pleasure, sends young men off to die in wars that he created. So in all of those aspects, he's got to learn to be a better person. But we do see that he is a person of power and prestige. We see that he is respected, even if he's not especially well liked. Does he have divine birthright? Yes. His mother is, throughout the story, said to be Ninsun, the wild cow. She's a goddess of fertility. He is described as strong, and he's described as physically attractive. The image here is typically how Gilgamesh is portrayed to have looked. Is that physically attractive? Not necessarily to me, my personal taste, but according to the standards of his day, he was considered physically attractive. And when you read that first tablet, that prologue that introduces us to Gilgamesh, he is described in physically glowing terms. He's described as someone who's tall, muscular, physically perfect, has this long mane of golden hair, and, just everything that you could imagine is physically attractive. He's described as that. And that actually was important in the ancient world for these heroes to be physically attractive. And I often tell my students that. We sometimes joke about it. But I say, would your definition of a hero be someone who has to be physically attractive? And most of us would say, no, that's kind of ridiculous. Would we expect a fireman or a first responder to have to be physically attractive to do his job? No, that would be ridiculous. But that had some value in the ancient world. And I think it comes down to this idea that genetics play a big part in the makeup of the epic hero. Right? He has to have these perfect genes. He has to be somebody that you would want to procreate with. That was important according to their belief system. Without that physical attractiveness, he would not be considered capable of having the qualities that he needs as a hero. And again, I think there's still some carryover of that when we think about the hero in our modern context. Because even if you look at the superhero films, if you look at Superman, if you look at Batman, etc., they're almost always portrayed as these very handsome, sort of muscular prototypes, right? And again, I think that's a carryover from these ancient ideas about physical attractiveness and the epic hero. And then, of course, the other requirement is he must embark on a journey. There must be a quest involved. In the case of the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's not any one specific journey necessarily, because there are several journeys that are described in that story over the course of those 11 to 12 tablets. So it's a question of which journey, right? Because I think in our version, in our text, we get at least 3 very specific journeys that Gilgamesh is sent on. But I think the one that most people remember the most is that quest for immortality. This is an unusual epic hero journey in a lot of ways, because it's not just the story of one hero who is on this journey. It's actually the story of 2. Enkidu as Gilgamesh's bestie, his best friend, who is sent to accompany him on these journeys. He really serves as Gilgamesh's better half. That's why I have the image of the scale there. He is sent by the gods to help ground Gilgamesh so that he can find a better version of himself. Enkidu is very calm, patient, he's reasonable, he thinks things through, whereas Gilgamesh is very impetuous and hot-headed and not given to reason. So the idea of the gods was that if you put these 2 together, 2 heads are better than one. If you put these 2 together, you get the best qualities of both, and they can balance each other out. The story of the coming of Enkidu it's a great turning point for Gilgamesh's character, because he starts to learn those lessons and how to be a better man because of his friendship with Enkidu. There is some speculation and controversy about the true nature of their relationship. It's sometimes, depending on the translation, it's described in very erotic terms. A lot of very romantic language here. They're described as kissing a lot, embracing each other a lot. We may tend to read more into that than what is actually meant. This was a culture that certainly was not homophobic in the way that we tend to be more homophobic, I think, in more recent times. They really wouldn't have thought much about that, but there's also something to be said for the value that this culture placed on male relationships and male friendships, comradeship. And these relationships had more value to this culture than male-female relationships, which were mostly just for procreation. So Is the relationship mostly that? Is it a relationship of brotherhood and shared need, or was there possibly something more? I don't know. You know, it's an interesting research question for sure. Um, Something you might want to think about exploring, you know, as you start to think about your semester project, maybe, because those are the type questions that you can certainly explore with that project. But the important thing to remember, you know, as we read through these early tablets, is that this friendship becomes crucial to the story and to the journey. And when Gilgamesh loses his friend, largely as a result of his own doings, his own insistence on doing things his way, which leads to the death of Enkidu, that really plunges Gilgamesh into a very dark place. That's his personal abyss. And that's a stage of the hero's journey, often talked about, the abyss, where the hero is plunged into that deepest, darkest place. So he's kind of forced to confront his own mortality as a result of that. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to Gilgamesh. Again, the goal for this week is to read the first 6 tablets, and I've got some questions for you to address on those 6 tablets following this video. Bye-bye.